Hello, good morning, and welcome to 3 Inning Fan, the podcast with me, Kelley Franco. September is a week away. That means 5 more weeks of the regular season. That means 5 more weeks of Aaron Judge possibly hitting 12 or more home runs. And the prices of seats in the outfield at Yankee Stadium for those last few games of the season are starting to climb. The playoff picture is taking shape, and as we get close to this final month, the playoff berths are getting, in some situations, a little more definitive, and in other situations, more fluid. We will be talking about the Mets and how they need a winning streak. Francisco Lindor's run at the NL MVP, the Yankees and Aaron Judge being absolutely insane, Ruthian even. And we'll talk a little Babe Ruth too, believe it or not. We will also talk about A-Rod and Monument Park. Does he belong there? You'll hear my answer with no waffling. And we have one of my favorite topics today, Scott Boras, why he was in the news this past week and what it means for his clients, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, and Alonso and Manaea. And as always, we will talk about what's good to eat while watching the ball game. Things are heating up, and that's why, now more than ever, it is important to watch and listen to 3 Inning Fan, the podcast. Is survival possible without it? Technically, yes, but it would be a much less fun survival. And don't forget, every download, like, listen, subscribe, and follow is incredibly meaningful to me. I have my own small business. It's 3 Inning Fan LLC, and I would like to grow it. My mission is to inform my listeners about baseball and all things MLB with a focus on New York baseball in an efficient and entertaining manner so we don't waste your time. And when you subscribe to me on YouTube or follow me on Apple or Spotify, you help a small business grow. Thank you. Let's talk some baseball, and we're going to start off with the Mets. So I spoke last week about how the Mets had to make a move and how I thought this was their moment. And they responded up until about the bottom of the 8th yesterday, which was Sunday. It's Monday as of this recording. So in the bottom of the 8th inning yesterday against the Padres, they allowed the Padres to tie it up and eventually win it on a walk-off home run by rookie sensation Jackson Merrill. So they split the series with the Padres, and that's not too shabby considering how hot the Padres have been, okay? But the Mets were so close to taking 3 out of 4 from the Padres. It was hard not to be disappointed. At this point, the Mets need to get hot. They're 2.5 games behind the Braves for that third wild card spot, and they've got to make that up. Unless you're my follower by Passix on X, who is still gunning for the division. God bless him. In the words of the grande dame of Mets Twitter, my friend Mary Lawler, she said, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but this win a game, lose a game pattern is not going to get a wild card for the Mets. And you know what? Mary's right. They've got to get a streak going because there is ground to make up. And although 2.5 games is not a lot if it's April or May, 2.5 games is a lot in September. Because remember, the Braves are trying to win too. Let's talk a little bit about Francisco Lindor, who has just been such an amazing pleasure to watch lately. He has been making his case for MVP. We saw him homer from both sides of the plate on Saturday against the Padres, which was great. But more than that, he's been offensively and defensively stellar, just all around amazing, except for his slow start. We all know that's how he rolls. And no Met, since they were invented in 1962, has ever gotten the MVP. So, could Francisco Lindor get it? No. Because Shohei Ohtani, I think you've heard of him. He just went 40 for 40. That's 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases in one season. And, of course, his 40th home run was a walk-off grand slam. Because Shohei Ohtani. There are only 5 other members of the 40-40 Club: A-Rod, Ronald Acuna Jr., Alfonso Soriano, Barry Bonds, and Jose Canseco. There are no members of the 50-50 Club, but this season there could be one, because Shohei Ohtani. Mets fans may argue that Lindor is actually playing a position this year, shortstop, and doing it well. And they are right. Ohtani is a DH. He's not pitching since he has been recuperating from the elbow surgery he had. But Mets fans, you're going to lose that argument. And another argument is to interpret the meaning of the MVP award and how it was designed to award the player who has contributed the most to his team's success. And you could argue, say, hey, the Dodgers are a team full of stars, and they would be successful even without Shohei Ohtani, whereas Francisco Lindor has really contributed more to the Mets' success. Yeah, you're losing that argument too. The bottom line is Francisco Lindor is absolutely amazing, but Shohei Ohtani is going to get the MVP. Speaking of MVPs, let's talk some Yankees. And I'll be 100% honest, I kind of didn't want to talk about Aaron Judge because I didn't want to be cliche, and everybody's talking about him. But it's at the point where we can't not talk about him. He is insane, like Crazy Eddie's prices at his August Christmas sale used to be. Look, the legends of the past are so important in this game. I still dream about what it must have been like to be able to see guys like DiMaggio and Mantle and Mays and going back further, Ruth and Gehrig. I dream about what it would have been like to watch them play. We're watching it now. We are watching greatness, a transcendent player with Aaron Judge. He will have the mythical status that Mantle and Mays and Ruth and Gehrig had. Yes, he will. And so what I want us all to do is soak in every minute of watching him, because your grandchildren and their children will be asking you what it was like to see Aaron Judge play. Did someone say Babe Ruth? Just this weekend, the jersey that he was wearing when he called his famous called shot in the 1932 World Series against the Cubs. It was Game 3 at Wrigley Field. You all know the story. He pointed to the stands, supposedly, and then hit the homer there. A little bit of a debated story. But anyway, so the jersey that he was wearing at that time was sold by Heritage Auctions, known for their sports portfolio there. It was sold for $24.12 million. Can you believe that? I don't know how I'm going to hide it from my husband. No, just kidding. So, yeah, Heritage Auctions has a great collection of sports memorabilia. The previous record price for a sports collectible was a beautiful mint condition 1952 Mickey Mantle card, which sold in 2022 for $12.6 million. Whew, those are some numbers. Speaking of old timers, the Yankees had Old Timers Day on Saturday, and the only thing wrong with it was that all the old timers are younger than me. There must have been an error. Anyway, it was a special event because it honored the 2009 World Series winning team. It was very nice, and of course, A-Rod was there. And then people had to ask, gee, will he ever have a plaque in Monument Park, that hallowed ground of Yankee Stadium? The press asked several ex-Yankees like Jeter, CC Sabathia, and Jorge Posada, and they all said basically, would you please go ask someone else? Do I think A-Rod belongs in Monument Park? While A-Rod was a Yankee, he had obvious ups and downs with Jeter. From the outside perspective, it seemed like Jeter was indifferent to him. And we all kind of saw A-Rod through that lens, maybe because we just loved Jeter that much. And it didn't help that A-Rod, let's face it, he was a drama queen. From PEDs to personal issues, he always seemed to bring commotion to the Yankees when he was a player. But maybe it's time we stopped seeing him through that lens, These days, he's good when I hear his analysis, and he seems like a genuine guy. To me, A-Rod is kind of like the Jimmy Carter of baseball. You liked him now more than you liked him when he was actually in office. So, should he be in Monument Park? Yes. He was one of the finest players in the game. He brought a World Series to New York, and he is part of Yankee history. Drama and all. Let's talk about so-called super agent Scott Boras, who was in the news last week and probably not in the way he wanted to be. Jordan Montgomery, the lefty pitcher and an old friend if you're a Yankee fan, was represented by Scott Boras last offseason when he was a free agent. Montgomery was coming off a stellar postseason performance with the World Series winning Texas Rangers, and he was just about 31 years old at a time when quality pitchers are always in demand, and he should have been a sought-after free agent landing a lucrative and long-term contract. Or at least multi-year contract at almost age 31. But he didn't sign a deal until opening day when he signed with the D-backs. He signed a one-year, $25 million deal that includes a vesting option for 2025. He then fired Boras, and shortly afterward, he hired Wasserman's Joel Wolfe and Nick Chanock to be his new agents. Because Montgomery didn't sign until opening day, he missed spring training and didn't make his first appearance until April 19th. Even worse, his performance this year has been woeful. In 19 starts, he has a 6.44 ERA, and the D-backs announced last week he was being kicked to the bullpen out of the starting rotation. It's been a rough season for Monty. So why were Boras and Montgomery in the news? Because Montgomery told the Boston Herald last week, and you can go check out Max Cerullo's piece on it, which was great. Monty said that he would have been interested in signing with the Boston Red Sox, but that, quote, obviously Boras kind of butchered it, unquote. Boras responded with a quote of his own, saying that due to client obligations, which of course extend to former clients as well, he couldn't discuss the situation unless Montgomery gave him permission to do so. As an attorney, I can certainly understand this. But here's the deal. Last offseason, the so-called Boras Four, that would be Montgomery plus Blake Snell, Matt Chapman, and Cody Bellinger, went unsigned until very late in the offseason and signed deals less lucrative than projected. So it wasn't just Montgomery who wound up with the short straw among the Boras clients. Although I did read this morning that Snell said he had a great experience with Boras and thought Montgomery's criticism was unfair. Okay, so let's look at both sides. But last season did lead the industry and fans to wonder if the sun was setting on the Scott Boras empire. And why do New Yorkers care? Because Boras will be repping several notable New York players this offseason, including Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, and Sean Manaea. To be clear, Manaea has a $13.5 million player option at the end of this season. If you've been listening, you already knew that. So Manaea can take that, or he can opt out and test the free agent market. But with the way he's pitching, I do not see him exercising the option. I see him testing the free agent market. And if the Mets and Yankee fans care about these players staying in New York, they don't want Boras to butcher anything. Now, Boras will do great with Soto because Soto is a megastar who's 25 years old, and he's having the mother of all walk years. He's going to get $500 million. But let's be honest, is Boras the only agent who could negotiate that type of deal for Soto? No. Soto is the kind of player who, because of his youth and generational talent, could sell himself if he wanted to. To put it in attorney terms, it's the case you can't lose. So Boras will get that deal done. He's not going to butcher it. But then we have guys like Manaea and Alonso, two guys who many Mets fans would like to see stay Mets, at a price, of course. And if the bidding is fair and square and the Mets don't get them, then that's acceptable. But what you don't want is to see Boras, to use Montgomery's words, butcher the deals. Now, I can tell you, as an attorney of almost 30 years now, that sometimes attorneys get in the way of settlements. In my many years of practice, I can tell you that I have told more than one client on the phone, look, hang up with me, go buy a bottle of scotch, go see the guy you're thinking about suing, and lock yourselves in a room, drink, and nobody gets out until your case is settled. Don't spend the money on the attorney. We'll only get in the way, because that's the truth sometimes. And the same thing can happen in negotiations with a club and a player. The team might want the guy and the guy might want the club, but middlemen can sometimes muck it up. Because from the Herald's reporting on the issue, it seems like Montgomery wanted to be a Red Sox and the Sox had interest in him, but the deal didn't get done. And that's why Monty said Boras butchered it. If you're a Mets fan, you don't want to see this happen with Manaea and Alonso. Their cases are much more nuanced than Soto's. They're good, but they're not megastars, okay? And Montgomery, Chapman, Snell, and Bellinger were all good, but not megastars, and wound up with deals that some of them were likely quite unhappy with, although Snell did speak out in favor of Boras today. If you're a savvy baseball fan, you have to wonder whether the reign of Scott Boras is over and whether it helps or hurts your favorite player to have him as an agent, because he may not get the best deal. I think the owners are on to how Boras works and prefer not to do business with him. Do I think it's collusion? No. People throw around the term collusion, but in the legal world, it's a term of art. And in the MLB context, it requires that the owners actually work in concert with other owners, in this case, to avoid signing a certain player. I don't think that's what happened last offseason with Boras's clients, but I do think the owners only do business with him if they need to. And unless a player is a megastar, there is now a reluctance to make a deal with him. Let's pop around MLB for a minute, shall we? The Mariners dismissed Scott Boras last week. Unfortunately, they did this about 3 weeks too late, in my opinion. I honestly think the Mariners are done, but I hope I'm wrong. They're 4.5 games behind the Astros, who have returned to old form, and I just think they're going to be hard to catch. When I heard about Boras, I texted my good friend Matt, a huge and loyal Mariners fan. They're very loyal fans out there, and asked him how he felt about the dismissal. His answer started with, "We all love Boras as a person." And he went on to say that it was time for a change and Boras wasn't getting the best out of their players. It made me think about how if ever anyone ever starts a conversation with, "We all really like you as a person," whatever comes after that is really bad. In the category of all the young dudes, I saw my 11-year-old grandnephew, Connor, a couple of weekends ago, and he is my new favorite subscriber to this podcast. Thanks, Connor. He lives in the Asheville area, and he told me his favorite team was the Asheville Tourists. And I had to look them up. I hadn't known about the Asheville Tourists. They're a high A team in the Astros system. Connor, thanks for teaching me about the Tourists, and I hope that at some point we can get to a game there together. Let's close this thing up with what's good to eat while watching a ball game. Let's talk about tomatoes and tradition. Last weekend, my brother Duffy and I canned, which is a funny word because they actually go in a jar, but anyway, canned 200 pounds of tomatoes. My ex-followers may have seen my post on this, and maybe you noticed my Band-Aid from the burn I got while stirring a vat of boiling tomatoes. That is your Italian grandmother's equivalent of getting hit by a pitch, not rubbing it, not wincing, and just taking her base. Duffy and I and our dedicated but decidedly un-Italian spouses who are great sports do this every year. We source our tomatoes at a local small farm at the peak of their ripeness and preserve them, just like our grandma and grandpa did many, many years ago. And the tradition actually skipped a generation because our parents didn't do it. So Duffy and I had to search the internet and relearn how to do this from when my grandparents did it so many years ago. So the internet has a lot of good stuff on it. You should try it sometime. Anyway, so we've been doing this for about 15 years, or I don't know, maybe more. But anyway, it means that on a cold January Sunday, I will open jars of beautiful, fragrant tomatoes and basil, and I will use it to make a wonderful Sunday sauce. Or maybe you call it gravy. Whatever you make, sauce or gravy, make it delicious and make it a tremendous week. Thank you so much for joining me on 3 Inning Fan, the podcast, and I'll see you next week.